so tonight we're concluding our third week in a row talking about Aveilut. The majority, the bulk of the introduction to the shiur is focusing on Aveilut. I think in terms of Aveilut, it could be a whole practical lecture on what not to say when you're visiting mourners. But I feel like, honestly, there are people who are more experienced with this, who really could do a better job, do justice to that part. So I want to shift away from that. I think for the most part, people have a sense of what not to say, and I hope to use seichel in terms of thinking twice and making the focus more on the mourner than on yourself. I think that's the one thing I will say, that often I see people talk about themselves. As much as possible, that the focus really should be on the mourners, not just in trying to fill the space of the room. But now let's shift gears to talk about more of a halachic topic, and that is something that probably comes up more often than any other shaila you get with those who unfortunately have experienced loss, is how do we calculate the various critical stages of the mourning process. So the classic questions are from Shiva to Shloshim to Yud Aleph Chodesh, what we call Yom Hafsaka, the day of stopping to say Kaddish, through the Yortzeit. Do we create those days based on what we call Yom HaMisa, the day of death, or do we go by the Yom HaKfura, the day of the burial? So the consensus of the poskim seems to be that when it comes to Shiva and Shloshim, we all know that we start the Shiva count from the Kfura, and Shloshim also from the Kfura. I think those are the more well-known shilas. You don't get those shilas as much. And we start Shiva and Shloshim from the Kfura, and you count 7 or 30 days out corresponding. But what about the Yortzeit? The Yortzeit or Yud Beis, so Yud Aleph Chodesh, Yom HaFsaka. So when it comes to counting the 11 months, reminder that we assume that the din shel Gehenim for Rishayim is for a year. We assume that none of our relatives are Rishayim, so the common practice is that we only say Kaddish for 11 months. How do we determine the 11 months? So if we're counting Shiva and Shloshim from Yom HaKfura, so the same thing that typically we say that the 12 months of Niyug Aveilut, of practicing Aveilut, also is from the burial. Subsequently, you detract 1 month and 1 day from your count for 11 months. And so again, the consensus of the poskim seems to be that counting 11 months, you use Yom HaKfura. But the Yortzeit is more classically, we know that the Yortzeit is usually done on when?
Day of death.
The day of the dead. That's what seems to makes the most sense. When do you observe the commemoration of the death of the loved one? On the day of the dead. That seems to be the obvious answer. However, we find that the first origin of a shita saying actually go by Yom HaKfura is brought down in the Taz. And the Taz quotes a sefer the Masas Binyamin. The Masas Binyamin says that if the whole thing is a function of, depends on what happens on a Yortzeit, is the Yortzeit because we say Mazlo Rei at the Avil, that the Avil has some sort of auspicious time for the family, or do we say there's some sort of elevation, the end of the Gehenna period, the judgment period for the Avil concludes at the end of 12 months, and that's when the Avil kind of finishes their year of being judged. There's some sort of aliyah into a different realm in the world of the Shabbos. So if we're saying that there's a judgment of 12 months, so it's possible that the poskim seem to say that the judgment doesn't begin until actually Yom HaKfura. That the neshama seems to be in some sort of limbo state from the death until the Yom HaKfura. So the Masas Binyamin suggests that maybe the first year we should actually observe the Yortzeit, the Yom HaKfura, and only subsequently do we then year 2 and on come back to observing the Yortzeit on Yom HaMisa. The general consensus of the poskim is not this way. In fact, the Taz says, I can't even believe those words exited his mouth. He doesn't understand how we could be observing the Yortzeit not on the Yom HaMisa. And there seems to be a lengthy discussion in the Taz and the Shach, and there are a whole slew of different opinions. The Shach essentially says that as long as the Kfura happens within a normative amount of period. The question is what's around period, but what's normal? Let's say a day or 2 after the Misa. So then we would always follow even year 1, the Yom HaMisa. If it's like what he says, 3 or 4 or 15 days after the Yom HaMisa, the Kfura takes place, then everyone would agree in an abnormal situation where there was a long delay that everyone would say that you follow the Yom HaKfura. You would basically do the Yortzeit the first year. No one says after year 1. But the general cases is that the Yortzeit is going to be on the Yom HaMisa. Generally, the burials take place within 1 to 2 days. If there's an extended circumstance of 15 days, so then you would do the first year, observe the Yortzeit on Yom HaKfura. Yeah.
How do we, for the Shloshim and the Yud Aleph Chodesh, how do we calculate the day? So Shloshim, you're counting 30 days, and Yud Aleph Chodesh is like the day of the month? Or
so we calculate day by going 11 months forward. So he says, and then you subtract the day before. So let's say it's Rosh Chodesh, let's say it's a day's Kislev, so you look 11 months, whatever, 11 months, and then you do Aleph of the 11th month. So it's the day before. And that's for Yom HaFsaka.
Wait, I'm sorry. Aleph would be the last day you say Kaddish?
The last day you say Kaddish would be the Aleph, if Beis was the day of the 11, count of 11 months.
Right. And if the month that the person, whatever, was like Lamed and there's no Lamed in that month, whatever, you just do.
So I think you would do, right.
-1?
Right, yeah, so then you do -2, I guess. That's an interesting question. So what happens to me is that the post can bring down, there seems to be a little bit of contradiction. What about the number 2? Where does number 2 fall out? In one place in the Shach seems to imply that 2 is kind of not as common. Another place in the Shach seems to imply that only 3 and 4 since they're not common, and 2 is considered more common. So there is a debate when the burial happens 2 days out. But what I saw in Rabbi Goldberg's book on mourning, he quotes that's not such an uncommon scenario. If there's a death on Friday, so then the burial often is on Sunday. It's not so uncommon for that to happen. What we're trying to avoid, is we don't want to have a case where you are having the Yortzeits and then the Niyug Aveilut still keep going for a few more days. That's kind of what we're trying to avoid that scenario. So we're afraid that people really, once the Yortzeit comes, they kind of think we're done. I finished my year, my Yortzeit is over. But everyone seems to say that Yud Beis Chodesh, and all the checks of Shiva, Shloshim, Kaddish, 11 months, 12 months, go from Yom HaKfura. So if we're saying they go from Yom HaKfura, but we're saying the Yortzeit goes to Yom HaMisa, we could be in this halachic quandary where we did the Yortzeit, but you're still supposed to be keeping Niyug Avelos. So I said the Mishnah Berurah seems to be okay with that quandary. The Mishnah Berurah wasn't so concerned that a person should observe Yom HaMisa, even on year 1. The Yortzeit should be on Yom HaMisa, the day of the death. And the fact that you have to keep 1 or 2 extra days, the Mishnah Berurah doesn't seem to find that to be such a problematic case. I didn't see the Rosh Hashanah. He quoted in Rabbi Goldberg's case that Ramosha felt that it is somewhat of a halachic problem, that even from 2 days apart, that if we were to observe Yom HaMisa, and you could have the extenuating Yud Beis Chodesh Niyug Avelos going for 2 more days after the Yortzeit, and therefore in a scenario of 2 days, Rav Moshe paskins not like the Mishnah Berurah, that one should actually go the year 1 after Yom HaKfura in year 1. So there seems to be a debate on how we handle 2 days. Again, to recap, if the Kfura happens within the next day, that day or the next day, everyone agrees to do Yom HaMisa. If it happens 3 or 4 days, I want to say everyone, but most poskim seem to say then you do Yom HaKfura on year 1. The debate seems to be if the Kfura happens 2 days later, because it's quantum. The Shabura Paskins, you just do year 1 also Yom HaMisa. Ramosha seems to imply you would do Yom HaKfura in that scenario. Only year 1, after that you always do year 2. Yeah.
Sorry, it's the Niyug Avelim for the first year going to the Yom HaKfura. The nafkamina was when you say Kaddish, is that it?
The nafkamina would be also, let's say, going to a simcha. You wouldn't be going to a party.
You wouldn't go at all on your time?
Right, until Yud Beis Chodesh, you do Niyug Avelos.
But Niyug Avelos, you say, is always Yom HaKfura, even the first year if it's the day after. I thought that's what you said.
Say one more time?
Niyug Avelos, it sounded like you said.
Niyug Avelos is usually Yom HaKfura.
No matter what.
Usually Yom HaKfura, right.
Even if it was the day after the burial.
No, so I want to clarify.
Oh, okay.
So I clarify. So if the Yortzeit is the day after, then you do stop with the Yortzeit the day after.
Okay.
On Yom HaMisa. Yeah. So there's just some interesting questions. I think these practically happen a lot. A lot of these scenarios come up. So usually it's a case by case, because you have to know exactly, was it 2 days, was it 3 days, and therefore determining factor.
Yontiv, like Rosh Hashanah comes out Thursday, Friday, you got Shabbat, there's 3 days right there.
Right. So just a few little things that can't come into that. So I saw, just looking into these topics, Lamat Ephraim says if you're Kal Ranina's case, and you can't, you haven't done a kfura for a few days, not to say Kaddish and Shabbos Yom Tov, which that shayla has come up over the years, where you have a burial that's delayed, not to say Kaddish. Another interesting question that came up a couple weeks ago. Someone in the shul had Yortzeit on Shabbos. Good for the Gabanim to know. Someone Yortzeit on Shabbos. So the question was, when do they start saying Kaddish? When we say Kabbalah Shabbos, is that accepting Shabbos, and therefore it's already the Yortzeit, or do you wait till Ma'ariv? So this I saw in one of the...
It's one Kaddish. It's the one Kaddish
really,
between that you're asking.
No, two.
What?
It's two. Bava Malikin.
After the Kash Rabban, after Bava Malikin, and then the one after Ms. Mashir. After Ms. Mashir.
Before Bava Malikin and after. So I did see that was just another interesting thing to see. And one of the sources here, I forget which one it was, he does mention to do that one should start after Bava Malikin. So you would not do the first Kaddish, but you would do the second Kaddish after Bava Malikin. At that point already.
I don't have that issue this year.
No, but it happens.
I'm saying Kaddish.
So you say the Kaddish, wait. So you don't say the Kaddish Yosem, but you say the Kaddish Rabban.
Kaddish Yosem, he said here. It says the Yakad Yosef, page 199. It says, "Aminagul atchil lomar Kaddish me'arvit shalil Shabbat." Not saying Kabbalah Shabbos, but then in parentheses he writes Kaddish she'achar Bava Malikin. You would start from that.
It's Kaddish Rabban.
Kaddish Rabban you would say, but the Kaddish Yosem before.
Because I've seen both. I mean, I've seen people say Kaddish both for the Yosem and the Rabbanan, and I've seen people say for Ma'ariv.
Right.
So does that mean that someone who has Yortzeit on Friday would say the Kaddish Yosem for Ms. Marshir?
That would imply, yeah.
That's sort of like that's between the Kaddish after Mincha.
It is interesting because usually we say that Ms. Marshir is when you accept Shabbos, so one would think that it should be a package deal,
right.
Which is why maybe. But again, this is what the Yakad Yosef writes. It could be that there's another. I just never saw someone inside. I saw the Yakad Yosef inside. Anyway, hopefully it's just a little bit of a smattering of interesting halachos, so we know practically what to do in these scenarios, but we should not know these scenarios.